Okay, good afternoon. My name is Alicia Gonzalez, and I'm the treasurer of the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Magistrate Lucy Miller, and she's from the 17th Judicial Circuit in Broward County, Florida. So, how are you, Judge Miller?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yourself?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, as you've introduced, I am Lucy Ramos Miller. I have been a magistrate with the 17th Judicial Circuit since 2012. Prior to that, I was a staff attorney with the 17th Judicial Circuit. I am married, have been married for 21 years, have 3 children, ages 19, 16, and 11. All of them have birthdays coming up in January. Yes, my oldest is a sophomore in college. She is at the University of Michigan. My middle is a junior in high school at American Heritage, and my youngest is in his 6th grade year in middle school. So both of my parents are actually from Utuado, Puerto Rico, but I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Went to undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania, and then went back to Ohio for law school, went to Ohio State University, and began my career, my legal career in Ohio. Obviously, I'm no longer in Ohio, have not been for quite some time, but that's kind of the brief background.
Oh, well, thank you. I can't believe you have 3 kids. That must be tough being a judge.
I have 3 kids, and it's funny because up until about a year or so ago, my husband actually traveled a lot for work. And for a period of almost 3 years, he was actually working full-time in Pittsburgh. So he would travel during the week for work, and then he'd come home on the weekend. So it was me and the 3 kids. So it was quite challenging, but interesting. So we're over that hump now.
So how did you end up in Florida since you started off your career in Ohio?
Well, actually, through my husband's employment back in 2006, he was working for a company called Goodyear Tire and Rubber. And he was given an opportunity to run a portion of the business in Jamaica. So we actually relocated to Jamaica for a period of about 3 years. And at the conclusion of his position there were options of relocating to either South Florida, Miami in particular, or Puerto Rico. And ultimately they decided to transfer him to South Florida. And so we have been here since then.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and you're particularly appointed to the family section, right, as a magistrate?
Correct. I exclusively do family.
Okay. And did you start off your career doing family law, or did you start off in a different path and then switch?
I've pretty much been in family my entire legal career, at least in one form or other. I actually started off in Ohio as an assistant prosecuting attorney. And at that time, I was assigned to the dependency division. So I handled I guess out here it's called Child Protective Services. Out there it's called Children's Services. But in any event, I handled all of the dependency matters, abuse, neglect for the Child Protective Services agency out there. And so, but it was still under the umbrella of family in Ohio. And when I left, I went into private practice, and I continued to do some dependency neglect as a defense attorney, and also started doing family law cases, divorces, custody issues, that kind of thing. And so I've been doing that since. And then as a staff attorney, when I started here, because of my background, I inevitably was, although officially in the civil unit, um, all of the family cases seem to have come to me. So I continued to do family even when I wasn't doing family. So.
Before going to law school, did you know that you wanted to get into, the dependency family law area of the law, or did you kind of just fall into that practice?
I did not. I stumbled in it, to be perfectly honest. When I graduated from law school, I always knew that I wanted to be a litigator, but I did not know whether I would make a long-term career out of criminal litigation or some other area. And so when I graduated, I thought that the best way to kind of start figuring that out is to go to the assistant prosecutor's office. No better way to get litigation experience than, diving right in and going to the prosecutor's office. And fortunately, at least in the area that I was living in at the time, we had access to criminal and the juvenile cases. So the dependent neglect, which is technically civil, as well as the delinquency, and then the adult criminal. And so I was able to kind of do a little bit of each of those, but primarily assigned to dependency. And it just, it just stuck, and I enjoyed the litigation. I enjoyed working with families and feeling like, you were making a difference in people's lives, not, necessarily getting folks out of jail or putting folks in jail, but actually impacting lives. And so it's kind of just stuck.
Interesting. And so I guess I'm curious, from going to being a litigator on one end of it to being a magistrate, do you like that transition, or what's your preference?
There are times that I miss litigating, and being behind the bench, we're often able to see all sides of it, and I've been on all sides of it throughout my career. Like I said, I started off as a prosecutor, went into defense work after that, and also did some guardian ad litem work. So I've kind of been on all sides, and I think that that's actually been very helpful, because oftentimes, and unfortunately, when you get folks who have kind of done defense work or prosecutorial work exclusively in their career, and they take on either a judgeship or a general magistrate position, sometimes they can still have tunnel vision, and very prosecutorial minded, and so. But for me, I find that having had the experience all around, I think makes me a little more open to all sides. And so I don't get stuck in that leaning one way or the other position that sometimes we can get stuck in. But there are times that I miss it. I'll sit behind the bench, and I know that, my position is to make decisions. But sometimes, there's a case that comes across and you're like, man, I wish I could just tell this guy what to do here. I wish I could just tell her that she needs to do this, and so, you get that here and there, but I do enjoy being behind the bench. I feel like I have more of an impact behind the bench than advocating for one position or the other.
And I guess so many people don't get to see what it is to sit behind the bench and rule on a case. What's the most challenging part of that for you?
Well, because we do family, for me, it's knowing if ultimately I've been given enough information, if ultimately I've been given truthful information, and that the decisions that I'm making are ultimately in the best interest of the children that we're impacting, because it's tough. We're at the mercy of what the parties and the attorneys present to us. We can't, we can't do the role of the attorneys and present information. We can rule on what is given to us, and sometimes it's not enough. And sometimes, there are days that you'll lose a little bit of sleep at night, wondering if you made the right decision for a particular family, especially where the children are involved, because it's very easy to make the wrong decision, even though you think you're doing the right thing.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people may not be familiar with the process for becoming a magistrate. Is there a process, or are you just handpicked, selected, and so what was the process?
Well, I can only speak for the 17th Circuit, and it was an application process that was open to the public, so it wasn't just courthouse personnel. And you apply just like everyone else, and you go through a round of interviews. It's changed a bit over the years. And so while it may have started with a panel of, you know, Diana Sobel, who was in charge of human resources, Kathy Pugh, the court administrator, and at the time, the chief judge. I think it has since changed to a panel that includes other judges. And so there's more of a process than there used to be. But it really was an application and interview process, just like any other position.
And so since I asked you what the most challenging part of your job was, I guess I have to ask the counterpart to that. What's your favorite part of being a magistrate?
I think I draw the most joy and fulfillment out of knowing that most of the folks that are coming through my hearing room are in an emotionally charged situation. And what we don't want to do is send broken families even more broken away. And so the best part of my job is seeing when, even in spite of an adversarial process, we're able to send folks out the door either as good or better than they walked in. And it's always the better than they walked in that we hope for, but certainly we don't want to send them off any worse. And it's a good feeling to see folks who are able to get through this process and still not appear to be completely broken in spirit and able to move on and function in society and in their family units. The reality is, even after a divorce, these folks are still family in one form or other, and they still have to be able to function in that setting. So it's always fulfilling to see when folks are able to get through the process and still feel okay, and feel like, you know, they've had a fair process, that they've had an opportunity to be heard, and ultimately what they're walking away with is really the best for their family. You know, it's not always possible, but when it happens, it's a really good feeling.
Well, Judge Miller, thank you so much for your time today, and we're lucky to have such a caring and knowledgeable judge on the bench.